Once upon a time, these game franchises were legends, the kind that shaped the industry and defined entire genres. But somewhere along the way, they lost the plot. Whether it was corporate meddling, chasing trends, or just forgetting what made them great in the first place, these once mighty series slowly unraveled into shadows of their former selves. Some tried to reinvent the wheel, others doubled down on the wrong ideas. A few simply faded into obscurity with barely a whisper. And yet, the stories behind their downfall are as fascinating as the games themselves. Let's count down 10 game franchises that didn't just fall off, they crashed.
Number 10, Battlefield. There was a time when Battlefield stood proudly on its own. Massive maps, team coordination, destructible environments. It was the thinking man's shooter, and no other franchise came close. But somewhere after Battlefield 4, things took a strange turn. Rather than refining what made it special, Battlefield started chasing trends. With Battlefield V, the series stumbled into chaos, a marketing disaster, a lack of identity, and a half-baked live service model. Then came Battlefield 2042, which should have been a triumphant leap forward. Instead, it felt like a desperate attempt to mimic Call of Duty Warzone and Apex Legends, stripping away squad-based tactics in favor of flashy gimmicks and soulless spectacle. Gone were the meaningful class systems. Gone was the satisfying chaos of conquest. What replaced it was a hollow shell packed with bugs, broken promises, and a community that felt completely unheard. Players weren't asking for specialists with hero powers, they were begging for the return of depth, strategy, and the Battlefield identity. The result? One of the most disappointing modern FPS entries in years. But Battlefield's fall isn't an isolated case. It's part of a pattern we've seen before.
Number 9, Far Cry. When Far Cry 2 dropped, it was messy, raw, and brutally immersive. Guns jammed, fire spread uncontrollably. You had to read your map in real time and plan your attacks like a mercenary in hostile territory. It was far from perfect, but it felt alive, like the world pushed back when you tried to bend it. Then came Far Cry 3, and while it smoothed out the rough edges, it also began a shift from survival sim to slick blockbuster. With each new entry, that raw authenticity faded. By the time we reached Far Cry 6, the series had transformed into a flashy, open-world playground, bright, loud, and painfully predictable. Explosions everywhere, but none of them felt earned. You could burn a field with a flamethrower, but the fire fizzled out before it meant anything. The dynamic systems of old were replaced with rigid mission design and mindless loot grinds. Allies went from complex systems to forgettable sidekicks. And the maps? Gorgeous, but shallow. More like amusement parks than actual war zones. What used to be a franchise about immersion and unpredictability became a formulaic checklist of distractions.
Number 8, Dead Rising. The original Dead Rising was chaos in a mall, and that was the point. Time limits, hundreds of zombies, psychos with twisted backstories, and the ever-present pressure of saving survivors or missing your chance forever. It was stressful, weird, and completely unforgettable. Dead Rising 2 evolved the formula with weapon crafting and added even more layers of tension. But instead of building on that momentum, Capcom started stripping everything down. Dead Rising 3 relaxed the timer. Dead Rising 4 got rid of it entirely, and with it, most of the game's soul. By the fourth game, the series had become nearly unrecognizable. The iconic psychopath boss battles? Gone. The time crunch that made every decision matter? Scrapped. Even the protagonist, Frank West, felt hollow, a shell of the sarcastic, camera-wielding survivor fans once loved. What remained was just another zombie game in an overcrowded genre. It wasn't terrible, it just wasn't Dead Rising. And the worst part? The things that made the series unique, its tension, its weirdness, its identity, were sacrificed for broader appeal, and it didn't work. The result was a franchise that slowly bled out from self-inflicted wounds. And it's not the only series that lost its way by trading originality for mass appeal.
Number 7, Red Faction. Red Faction Guerrilla was a love letter to controlled chaos. Set on Mars, it handed players a sledgehammer and said, "Go wild." Buildings crumbled, bridges collapsed, and strategy emerged from destruction. It wasn't just fun, it was revolutionary. You weren't just fighting enemies, you were reshaping the battlefield. Then came Red Faction Armageddon, and everything changed. For the worse. Gone was the sprawling open world. Gone were the tactical demolitions and unpredictable missions. Instead, players were funneled into claustrophobic corridors, blasting aliens instead of toppling outposts. The world shrunk, the creativity vanished, and worst of all, the destruction, the very thing that defined the franchise, became an afterthought. Sure, you could now repair things, but why would you want to fix a building in a game that was famous for blowing them up? It felt like the developers took everything that made Guerrilla exciting and said, what if we just didn't? Armageddon wasn't unplayable, it just betrayed everything the franchise stood for. And speaking of franchises that ditched complexity for convenience, that brings us to a fan favorite that's now dividing its own community.
Number 6. Monster Hunter. Monster Hunter used to be a franchise that demanded your full attention, methodical prep, strategic planning, and battles that felt like chess matches with claws. Each hunt was a puzzle. You tracked the beast, learned its rhythms, exploited its weaknesses, and adjusted your tactics on the fly. It was demanding, and that's exactly why fans loved it. Then came Monster Hunter World, a huge leap forward in visuals and accessibility. It was a win, mostly. But with Monster Hunter Wilds, something feels off. To be clear, Wilds isn't a bad game. It introduces dynamic herds, shifting weather, and new tools. But it also strips away a lot of what made the older entries feel personal and intense. Palico companions, once customizable and strategic, now they just do everything for you. The satisfaction of carefully managing ailments, setting traps, or choosing the right moment to strike, mostly gone. Even the tracking is automated. No more following monster prints or reading clues. The game now whisks you directly to your target, like a guided tour. Exploration has been reduced to unlocking fast travel camps. The thrill of the hunt has been replaced by the convenience of a commute. And while some players welcome this streamlined approach, longtime fans feel like the hunting in Monster Hunter is slowly being deleted. But if you think that's a betrayal, wait until you see what happened to one of BioWare's most beloved franchises.
Number 5. Dragon Age. Dragon Age Origins was BioWare at its peak, a dark, sprawling fantasy epic where your choices shaped kingdoms. You picked your character's origin story, earned or lost loyalty, and navigated political webs with real consequences. The combat was tactical, the dialogue rich, and the world felt deeply alive. But the descent began almost immediately. Dragon Age 2 rushed out the door with recycled maps and simplified mechanics. The origin stories were gone, combat was flashier but shallower, and player choices felt oddly muted. Still, some fans held on, hoping BioWare would bounce back. Then came Inquisition. Bigger, yes, and definitely more polished, but its open world was filled with fetch quests, its deep role-playing roots buried under MMO-like grinding. Dialogue and relationships remained, but the storytelling lost its bite. It felt like BioWare was trying to appeal to everyone, and in the process, lost what made them special. By the time we got to Veilguard, the transformation was complete. Gone were tactical party commands and branching storylines, replaced by button-mashing hack-and-slash mechanics and linear zones. Even the companions, once a highlight of the series, felt more like background noise than actual people. At this point, Dragon Age isn't the same franchise. It's a shadow of its RPG roots, wrapped in flashy visuals and stripped of soul. But even that isn't as jarring as what happened to one of gaming's most brutal, iconic franchises.
4. Mortal Kombat. For a while, Mortal Kombat was on fire. MK9 revived the franchise. MKX refined it. And Mortal Kombat 11? That was the crown jewel. Massive roster, layered mechanics, custom movesets, deep progression, and enough content to keep players busy for years. Then came Mortal Kombat 1. And despite the name, it felt like a reset in all the wrong ways. The roster? Shrunk. Customization? Gutted. Fan favorite features like the crypt? Gone. Replaced by invasions, a grind-heavy mode that feels more like filler than innovation. Even the idea of cameo fighters, meant to add flair, just reminds players of who didn't make it in as a playable character. And then there's the guest characters, a bizarre obsession. Homelander, Omni-Man, Peacemaker, all fun for a few minutes, but do we need 2 evil Supermen? It's starting to feel more like multiverses with blood. Mortal Kombat has always walked a line between brutal fun and refined fighting. But MK1 feels like it's lost balance, trading depth for flash, legacy for trends. It's not unplayable. It's just unworthy of the name it carries. But if Mortal Kombat stumble was frustrating, the next franchise shows just how far a legendary name can fall.
Number 3. Fallout, a wasteland of what could have been. Few franchises have a legacy as beloved and as fractured as Fallout. The original games were gritty, isometric RPGs with sharp writing and brutal, choice-driven narratives. Then Fallout 3 came along, shifting the series into first-person and introducing the wasteland to a new generation. Some called it betrayal, others called it evolution. But one thing was clear, the soul of Fallout was changing. Fallout New Vegas brought the series back to form. Deep factions, meaningful choices, branching dialogue paths, it felt like a proper successor. But instead of building on that, Fallout 4 took another direction. The dialogue system? Dumbed down. Player agency? Minimized. Your characters suddenly had a voice and only a few pre-written ways to respond, most of which boiled down to yes, sarcastic yes, or yes, but angry. Sure, gunplay was smoother and the settlement building was a novelty, but for fans of RPG mechanics, world-shifting decisions, and real character builds, it felt like the game was holding your hand the entire time. Then came Fallout 76. No real NPCs at launch, no classic quest structure, no single-player depth, just an empty multiplayer shell riddled with bugs and microtransactions. Even Bethesda couldn't deny the mess and spent years trying to fix it. Today, the Fallout name still sells, but what it stands for has changed completely. For many, the franchise didn't just evolve, it evaporated. And if you thought that was rough, the next entry proves you can strip a franchise down so far, it becomes unrecognizable.
Number 2. Dungeon Siege. The original Dungeon Siege wasn't revolutionary, but it nailed something few RPGs managed at the time. A tight, fast-paced hack and slash with the scale of a full-party RPG. You could command up to 8 characters, including a pack mule just to carry your loot. It was simple but satisfying, coordinating attacks, managing gear, and steamrolling through enemies with tactical precision. Then came Dungeon Siege 2. Smaller parties, fewer options. But okay, it still had depth. Still felt like a proper RPG. And then, Dungeon Siege 3. Everything that made the series unique was cut away. Party size reduced to just 2, and not even a proper 2-person team. You controlled one character, and an AI-controlled companion just followed you around, occasionally doing something helpful if the mood struck. The tactical layer? Gone. The loot? Watered down. The setting? Almost unrecognizable.
By the time the third game rolled around, it was more button masher with light RPG elements than squad-based action RPG. It went from managing a battle-hardened team to mashing through waves of enemies with barely a thought. The only thing left was the name on the box, and even that felt misplaced. It was like watching a classic series slowly erase itself, one bland design decision at a time. But even this slow collapse doesn't compare to what happened to one of gaming's most legendary titles.
Number 1. Castlevania. From gothic greatness to ghost of itself. Once a crown jewel of gaming, Castlevania was a series that evolved and then unraveled. It began as pure 2D platforming glory. Symphony of the Night turned it into something even bigger, the foundation for what we now call Metroidvania. Complex exploration, leveling, gear, secrets, it had it all. Then the series took bold steps into 3D. Some misfired, Castlevania 64 anyone, but Lords of Shadow brought a new kind of success. Cinematic, brutal, and surprisingly emotional. But that peak was short-lived. Lords of Shadow 2 stumbled with messy storytelling and awkward gameplay. And then, silence. Konami pulled the plug, and for years, Castlevania faded into the background, remembered, but not revived. Now, the most recent release was a remake of Haunted Castle, buried inside a retro collection. It's not a bad game. In fact, some fans love the return to roots. But it's also a symbol of how far the series has fallen. From cutting-edge 3D action to a reissued 16-bit relic. What once pushed the genre forward now exists as nostalgia. And while there's value in revisiting the past, Castlevania wasn't just a good game, it was a defining franchise. Now, it's little more than a memory, unless Konami decides to rise from the grave one more time.
That's our countdown of game franchises that didn't evolve, they devolved. Some lost their soul, others lost their way, and a few just lost it all. Which one hurt you the most? Let us know in the comments. And hey, if you enjoyed this video, give it a like and hit that subscribe button. We drop new videos like this all week long, and the best way to catch them is with notifications turned on. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.